The flicker started exactly at 3 a.m., a small, almost imperceptible hiccup in the otherwise flawless 4K display. Dr. Elias Vance leaned closer to the antique CRT monitor, the stale air of the university's deep archives heavy with the smell of old paper and ozone. Elias, a pale, perpetually anxious man in his late 30s, was obsessed with the ephemeral, things that should exist but don't, or things that did but vanished without a trace. His current fixation, the defunct social media platform, Arcadia wasn't just another forgotten MySpace clone. It had been, briefly, a hyper-exclusive, invite-only network launched in 2013, notorious for its uncanny ability to predict future trends and its sudden, catastrophic shutdown 6 months later. All official data backups were rumored to have been digitally scrubbed, leaving no trace. A modern myth, but Elias had found a sliver. He ran his gloved finger over the label of the Arcadia Beta Archive Drive, ABAD, a non-standard 10 terabytes hard drive he'd acquired from a disgraced former lead developer under a strict NDA. This drive contained the complete, unfiltered server logs and user data from Arcadia's earliest, most secretive test phase, the Genesis phase. He was working in the lowest sublevel of the St. Jude's University Library, a forgotten bunker built during the Cold War. The security system was a joke. The isolation was perfect. All right, let's see what you were really hiding, Elias muttered, typing the complex decryption key, a sequence of geometric patterns and astrological symbols. The file structure populated immediately. Thousands of user profiles, billions of lines of code. But one folder stood out, unsorted _echoes. It contained just 10 files, all video clips, named only by a date and a timestamp. Elias clicked on the first one, 07-14-2013 _0300am.mp4. The video loaded instantly, displaying a grainy, low-light shot of a generic suburban living room. A woman, mid-20s, sat on a leather sofa, scrolling on a phone, her face illuminated only by the screen. The only sound was the faint hum of an air conditioner. Boring. Elias was about to skip it when the flicker happened. At the exact 3 a.m. timestamp on the video's internal clock, the screen went black for a quarter of a second. When it returned, the room was identical, the woman was still scrolling, but one thing had changed. On the blank wall behind her head, a dark, dripping crimson mark, about the size of a fist, had appeared. It looked like spilled paint, or blood. Elias froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He replayed the segment, before 3 a.m., clean, pale yellow wall. At 3 a.m., the glitch black screen flash, after 3 a.m., the crimson mark is there. It wasn't a jump cut. The woman in the video never reacted. She just kept scrolling, oblivious to the impossible, instantaneous appearance of the stain. Elias's hands were shaking. He pulled up the server logs for that specific file. The metadata for 07-14-2013 _0300am.mp4 didn't just contain upload information, it had an extra, proprietary data field labeled, proximity_effect. The value next to it was plus 3 hours. He opened the second video, 07-14-2013 _0305am.mp4. Same woman, same room. The stain was still there, but now it had a small, shimmering blackness at its center, like a knot. Then he noticed the profile associated with the video at Cassandra_lives. The name hit him like a physical blow. Cassandra was the user who had famously posted cryptic warnings on Arcadia right before the platform was shut down, warnings that were later proven to be terrifyingly accurate predictions of real-world tragedies. She had vanished completely. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The videos weren't historical records of a moment in time. They were displaying something else. He opened the third video, checking the new proximity value, plus 7 days. It showed the woman again, 7 days later. The crimson mark on the wall had expanded into a grotesque, spiderweb-like smear, and the knot in the center was pulsing with a faint, oily luminescence. The woman was still on the couch, but now she was staring blankly, not at her phone, but directly into the camera, her eyes unnervingly wide and utterly vacant. Suddenly, a loud, sharp clang echoed from the air conditioning vent directly above the CRT monitor, making Elias physically jump back. He spun around, heart racing, scanning the empty, shadowed cavern of the archives. Nothing. Just the hum of the old server rack. He looked back at the screen. The woman in the video, at Cassandra_lives, hadn't moved. But her lips began to twitch, slowly, forming a silent word. Elias grabbed the dusty microphone attached to the machine, the input device used for annotating archived files. He hit the record button and whispered, "What did you see? What is the mark?" On the screen, the woman's mouth completed the word. Her voice, thin and distorted, crackled through the antique monitor's built-in speaker, seeming to come not from the video, but from the darkness behind him. "It's not what I saw, Elias. It's what you found." Would you like to continue to part 2, where Elias begins to realize the true, horrifying function of the proximity_effect files? The voice, whispering Elias's name from the antique speaker, was not a digital artifact, it was an impossible, targeted intrusion. Elias stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of brittle, century-old geology journals. The crash reverberated through the subterranean silence, momentarily snapping him out of his terror. "Who is this? How do you know my name?" he demanded, clutching the microphone. On the screen, the woman, Cassandra, gave a slow, unnerving smile. The oily black knot in the center of the wall stain seemed to pulse in time with her expression. "Arcadia knows all names, Elias. Especially the names of those who open the door again." Elias felt a surge of cold-fire panic. This wasn't a hacker. This wasn't a pre-recorded message. This was the data, somehow, responding. He forced himself to breathe, channeling his fear into academic rigor. "Explain the proximity_effect field," he pressed, his voice strained but steady. Cassandra's eyes flickered down, as if reading an invisible cue card. "The core function of the Genesis phase. It wasn't social media. It was predictive indexing. Users consented to a deep temporal scan, allowing the server to generate future echo points based on present-day interactions. But the timeline, it fractured." She pointed a rigid finger past the camera, towards something unseen in her virtual room. "The mark," she whispered, her voice dropping to a gravelly rasp. "That is the temporal scar. The visual representation of a timeline singularity. It appears when the predicted echo point is too close to the present." Elias understood the horrible implication immediately. The file he was watching wasn't just showing him a glimpse into the future it showed was actively bleeding back into the present of the video itself. He quickly toggled back to the desktop and clicked on the remaining videos in the unsorted_echoes folder, frantically checking the metadata. 07-14-2013 AM.mp4. Proximity_effect. +1 month 07-14-2013 0500 AM.mp4, proximity_effect, +3 months 07-14-2013 0600 AM.mp4, proximity_effect, +6 months. He opened the last one, the 6-month echo. The room was almost unrecognizable. The crimson scar had consumed the entire wall, bubbling and shifting like rotten meat. The furniture was overturned. The woman, Cassandra, was gone. Instead, standing directly in front of the camera, was a figure draped in shadow, too tall and too thin, its limbs obscured by the oppressive digital darkness. It stood where Cassandra's phone light would have been. Then, Elias noticed the floor. Littered across the carpet were dozens of items, small, mundane things, a car key, a university ID card, a distinctive antique silver pocket watch. Elias's breath hitched. That pocket watch. His grandfather's. The one he had tucked into the breast pocket of his vest exactly 20 minutes ago. He fumbled at his chest. The pocket watch was still there. It has to be, but the terror didn't stop. As he stared at the screen, the shadowy figure on the video moved. It lowered its head, and the blackness around it seemed to deepen into an abyssal void. Then, the figure slowly lifted its hand, a long, needle-thin digit, and pointed directly at the pile of debris on the floor of the video. Specifically, it was pointing at a man's wallet. Elias zoomed in on the texture of the worn leather. A faded S monogram was visible near the corner. It was his. It was Elias Vance's wallet. No. The temporal projection is localized to the user Cassandra. It can't include me. The mark isn't just affecting her timeline, Elias whispered into the mic, his voice a terrified realization. It's affecting anyone who interacts with the data stream. The figure on the screen turned its head, a subtle shift that felt like a universe tilting. The video abruptly cut out, replaced by the familiar, static-filled screen of the CRT. The connection to the ABAD hard drive instantly disconnected. Elias's mind raced. The proximity effect was accelerating. The final video showed his presence, his future artifacts, only 6 months ahead. Then, the lights in the deep archives began to flicker. Not the gentle static of the video, but the physical light bulbs overhead, pulsing rapidly, mirroring the glitch he saw in the first video. Flicker. Flash. Blackout. When the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the bunker in a sickly red glow, Elias realized 2 things. The air conditioning hum was gone. A deadly, complete silence had replaced it. The antique CRT monitor, now disconnected from the hard drive, was still displaying something. A single, stark white line of text, rendered in a low-resolution font, was scrolling across the dead screen, initiating proximity_effect, target, Dr. Elias Vance current effect value, +0 HOURS. The projected future from the final video wasn't 6 months away. It was now. A cold, heavy drop of liquid landed squarely on Elias's forehead. He slowly looked up, his eyes widening in horror as he realized the sharp clang he heard earlier hadn't been from the ventilation. It had been the sound of something entering the archive space. And that drop was crimson. The drop of crimson liquid on Elias's forehead was cold, viscous, and undeniably real. He slowly raised a trembling hand, touching the substance, then bringing his fingers before his eyes. It wasn't paint. It was congealed, dark blood, already beginning to crust. He looked up, above the CRT monitor, from the very air conditioning vent that had emitted the ominous clang. A slow, steady seep was beginning. The metallic grate was now stained with the same dark crimson, and a viscous, almost jelly-like substance began to drip, forming a grotesque stalactite that lengthened with terrifying speed. The stench of decay and something metallic filled the air. Current effect value, +0 HOURS. The words on the dead CRT monitor screamed in his mind. The 6-month projection, the one showing his wallet, his grandfather's watch, and the shadowy figure, was no longer a distant future. It was now. Elias scrambled back, knocking his chair over with a deafening clatter. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers slick with sweat. No signal. Of course. This bunker was designed to block everything that he had to get out. The emergency lights pulsed erratically, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like mocking phantoms across the stacks of forgotten knowledge. Every shadow seemed to coalesce, to twist into the form of the tall, thin figure from the video. He made a dash for the heavy steel door, the only exit, located 50 feet away. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. As he ran past the towering shelves of books, he noticed the walls. The concrete, reinforced walls of the deep archives were no longer uniform gray. Irregular, vein-like streaks of crimson were spreading from the corners, branching out like capillaries. It was the temporal scar, manifesting physically, bleeding into his reality. He reached the door, fumbling with the heavy steel lever. It was stiff, unyielding. He had always taken it for granted, the old, manual locking mechanism. Suddenly, a low, guttural slithering sound echoed from behind him. He spun around. The shadowy figure from the video was there, not a shadow. Not a trick of the light. It was impossibly tall, its limbs elongated and thin, shrouded in an unnatural darkness that seemed to absorb the sickly red emergency light. Its head was indistinct, a featureless void. It was standing right where the ABAD hard drive had been. It didn't move. It simply existed. And from its form, the same crimson, jelly-like substance dripped onto the floor, making a soft, squelching sound. Elias yanked at the door handle with renewed, desperate strength. It groaned, then clicked. He threw his weight against it, and the heavy door slowly, agonizingly, began to creak open, revealing a sliver of the dimly lit hallway beyond, but as the door opened, the air in the archives grew colder, the stench of decay more potent. And from the darkness of the hallway, he heard it, a faint, rhythmic thump-thump-thump, like something heavy and soft dragging itself along the floor. Elias squeezed through the narrow opening, barely clearing the door frame before slamming it shut behind him with all his might. The sound of the latch clicking into place was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. He leaned against the cold steel, gasping for air, his lungs burning. He was safe. For now that he looked down the deserted hallway. The thump-thump-thump was still there, closer now. It seemed to be coming from the main stairwell, leading up to the ground floor. He had two choices: confront whatever was in the stairwell, or take the maintenance tunnel, a cramped, seldom used passage that ran parallel to the main levels and exited onto the loading dock outside. He remembered the proximity effect value, +0 hours. The future was here. His future. The one with his wallet, his watch, and the figure. He opted for the tunnel. He found the entrance hidden behind a large, dusty fire extinguisher cabinet. It was a tight squeeze, requiring him to crawl. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of old pipes. As he crawled deeper into the narrow passage, the thumping sound from the main stairwell grew louder, more frantic. It sounded like something was struggling, thrashing against the metal railings. Then, a new sound began to echo from the tunnel ahead of him. A faint, repetitive whisper. It was her voice. Cassandra's voice, digitized and distorted, like a corrupted MP3. "It's not what I saw, Elias. It's what you found." And with each whispered repetition, the tunnel seemed to grow colder, the shadows within it deepening into impenetrable black. Elias pressed himself against the grimy concrete, wishing he could somehow vanish into the wall. He could hear the whispers getting closer. He crawled faster, ignoring the scrapes and bruises. He had to get out. He had to warn someone. About Arcadia. About the echo chamber. About the temporal scar. But what if the warning was already too late? What if the bleeding had already begun outside the archive, in the wider world? The whispers of Cassandra echoed and magnified in the tight confines of the maintenance tunnel, bouncing off the pipes and concrete until they surrounded Elias. They weren't just sound, they felt like pressure, a cold, sickening weight pressing against his eardrums. He scrambled on all fours, ignoring the burning in his lungs and the frantic warnings in his mind. The final whisper, "What you found," was delivered right next to his ear, making him flinch violently, convinced that the shadowy figure was now right behind him in the cramped darkness. He saw the light ahead, a small, rectangular gap marking the exit to the loading dock. He burst out of the tunnel, tumbling onto the cold, damp asphalt, gasping lungfuls of the crisp night air. The university loading dock was deserted, lit by a single, buzzing sodium lamp. Elias pulled himself up, clutching the ABAD hard drive, which he had somehow managed to keep secure during his desperate flight. He looked back at the university building. The window for the deep archives was a blank, black rectangle 3 stories up. The building looked solid, normal, utterly oblivious to the temporal horror festering in its basement. He needed a connection. He needed to upload the logs, to expose the drive, to prove what was happening. He pulled out his phone again. Still no signal. The deep archive signal jammer must have a wider range than he thought. He stumbled across the loading dock toward the street, a residential road lined with old oak trees and Victorian homes. But as he reached the curb, he froze. Something was wrong with the night sky. It wasn't the stars, or the moon, which was shrouded in clouds. It was the air itself. Above the distant horizon line of the city, the sky wasn't black or blue. It was filled with a subtle, shimmering interference, a vast, colorless static. It looked exactly like the noise from an untuned television, but stretched across miles of atmosphere, dominating the cityscape with its silent, impossible presence, the static horizon. It was the physical manifestation of the timeline fracture, the visible proof that the temporal scar was rapidly expanding beyond the archives. He saw a light on in the nearest house, a quiet, 2-story structure. Normalcy. He needed to touch it. He rushed across the lawn, pounded on the front door, and waited, heart pounding that a nervous, middle-aged man in a bathrobe opened the door, rubbing his eyes. "Can I help you, sir? It's awfully late. I need to use your phone, please, it's an emergency." "My car broke down, and my phone is dead," Elias lied, gesturing wildly at the hard drive in his hand. The man eyed Elias's disheveled appearance, the dark stain on his forehead, and the intense, desperate look in his eyes. Sure. Come in, quick." Elias stepped inside, relieved by the warmth and the reassuring smell of coffee and dust. He grabbed the man's landline phone, dialing his colleague, Professor Helena Graves, an expert in server redundancy and data anomalies. The line rang 3 times. A recorded message answered, but it wasn't Helena's voicemail. It was a synthesized, mechanical voice. "The number you have dialed is non-functional in this echo state. Please consult the most recent index." Elias slammed the phone down. What was that? The homeowner was staring at him, now fully awake and concerned. What was what? "That's the normal message if you dial a disconnected number." "You alright, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Professor Graves' number, it was working yesterday. She teaches at the university." The man frowned, crossing his arms. "Professor Graves? We've lived here 20 years. There's never been a Professor Graves at St. Jude's. The computer science department was dissolved in '08 after the budget cuts." Elias staggered back, hitting the wall. Impossible. Helena was his mentor. She had signed off on his research grant that he rushed to the man's small home computer, an old desktop model on a folding table. "Let me just check something, please." He opened a search engine and frantically typed. "Professor Helena Graves, St. Jude's University." The search results were uniformly chilling. "Page not found. 404 error, the requested profile does not exist." Then he searched for St. Jude's University Computer Science Department. The top result was a Wikipedia entry. The Computer Science Department at St. Jude's was permanently disbanded in 2008 due to lack of funding, following a catastrophic data breach. Elias stared, heart pounding against the fabric of reality. The temporal scar wasn't just manifesting figures and blood, it was rewriting the history around him. His memory of Helena, his grants, his entire academic framework for the last 5 years, might be phantom data from a timeline that no longer existed. He was a refugee in a subtly altered reality that he spun around to the homeowner, grabbing his shoulders. "Arcadia. Do you remember Arcadia? The social network from 2013? The man looked confused, then dismissive. "Never heard of it, pal. Look, I think you need to leave." The man was an echo. A person from the new, fractured timeline who had no memory of the original. Elias backed away, his mind reeling. He was truly alone. He had to find another nexus point, another piece of evidence that hadn't been scrubbed by the static horizon that he ran out of the house, back toward the university. He needed the one thing that seemed impervious to the rewrite, the ABAD hard drive, but as he looked back at the main university sign, which was still brightly lit, he saw a change. The university's founding date, which had always been 1888, was now subtly, terrifyingly, different. The stone plaque read, St. Jude's University, EST 1888. RE indexed, 2013. The single word on the stone plaque, RE indexed, 2013, was a digital signature scrawled across a physical monument. It confirmed Elias's deepest fear. The Arcadia Genesis phase hadn't just predicted the future, its failure had overwritten the past. The year 2013, the year of Arcadia's launch and immediate shutdown, was the timeline's breaking point that he ran across the university grounds, clutching the ABAD drive like a sacred, cursed artifact. The static horizon above the city pulsed faintly, a visible wound in the sky. Elias needed a secure, high-speed connection, a place that wouldn't immediately flag his presence or his data. He remembered one place that might still exist in this indexed reality, the off-campus server facility run by a secretive student tech collective, the ghost net that he found the old warehouse district 3 miles away, navigating by instinct, hoping his memory of the previous timeline still held true. He found the unmarked warehouse door, typed in the familiar 6-digit code, 13-13-13, and the heavy metal door clicked open. The warehouse interior was a chaotic sanctuary of blinking lights, humming servers, and wires. A single figure sat hunched over a bank of monitors, Milo, a young, heavily pierced computer science major who, in Elias's timeline, had worked part-time for Helena Graves. Milo looked up, his expression blank. "Yeah. What do you want?" "We're closed." Elias rushed forward. "Milo, it's me, Elias Vance. I need your fastest uplink. I have the ABAD drive." Milo narrowed his eyes. "Elias, who?" "Look, man, if you don't leave, I'm calling security." "I don't know who you are." He was an echo. Just like the man in the bathrobe. Milo had no memory of Elias, Helena, or the computer science department. The timeline shift was total. Elias desperately pulled the ABAD drive from his bag. "This. Do you recognize the proprietary file system on this drive? It's Genesis phase architecture." Milo glanced at the drive, a flicker of something, recognition. Fear, crossing his face, then vanishing. "It's a storage device. Get out." Elias realized he couldn't reason with an echo. He had to find someone who wasn't indexed. Someone who remembered the original timeline. A survivor. He had an idea, a horrible, risky one, based on Cassandra's testimony, the proximity_effect data. The logs recorded when the timeline was intact. "Milo, I need 5 minutes. I'll pay you, I'll give you the drive, whatever. Just give me access to this machine," Elias pleaded, pointing to the most isolated server rack. Milo sighed, annoyed but finally relenting, perhaps seeing the madness in Elias's eyes. 5 minutes. Then I'm locking down the building." Elias quickly connected the ABAD drive and loaded the raw server logs, bypassing the video files. He focused on the user database from the Genesis phase. He filtered the logs for users who had logged in exactly at the moment of the crash, 3 a.m., July 14, 2013, and who also showed the unique proximity_effect value in their metadata that he cross-referenced that list with the real-world GPS coordinates linked to those accounts. He was looking for other victims, users who were close enough to the temporal scar to have avoided the timeline index. One name glowed on the screen, Liam Chandler, Arcadia handle at TRUTHPULSE last known location, pre-index a small, independent bookstore named the Chronographers Nook, downtown. Proximity_effect, +5 days. Liam Chandler was likely a survivor, an echo like himself. His timeline had only been affected by +5 days, meaning he might only have minor discrepancies in his memory, or perhaps, a full memory of the original reality. Elias disconnected the drive, his 5 minutes up. "Time's up." Milo snapped, standing over him. "I'm leaving," Elias said, stuffing the drive into his jacket. "One last question. The Chronographers Nook. Does it still exist?" Milo scoffed. "Sure, the crazy old place. It's across the river. But they don't sell books, man. They sell chronological alignment aids. Weird cult stuff." Cult stuff. The indexed reality had changed the bookstore into something ominous. "Perfect," Elias bolted for the exit. As he ran, Milo shouted, "Hey! You left your ID card." Elias stopped. His university ID. He hadn't needed it to get into the deep archives. He turned back. Milo held up a laminated card. The photo was Elias, but the title beneath his name was horrifyingly different, Elias Vance, class of 2013. Project, Cassandra Alignment. Elias snatched the card. "That's not me. I wasn't a student in 2013. Milo's face was utterly serious. "It's the only record I could find of a student named Elias Vance. You were part of the Genesis phase's original user group." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, his eyes showing a flash of something that wasn't Milo, but a terrifying knowledge. You didn't find the ABAD drive, Elias. You uploaded yourself to it. A chilling realization washed over Elias. He was not a researcher from the future finding an old file. He was a piece of the original Arcadia data, a ghost given corporeal form by the drive's power. He was a temporal scar walking that he fled the warehouse and ran into the night. Above him, the static horizon was intensifying, now faintly tinged with that same, oily crimson. He knew he had minutes, not hours, to reach Liam Chandler before the entire city was consumed by the indexed reality. The revelation from Milo, that Elias Vance was a participant, perhaps even a victim, of the Genesis phase, sent a fresh wave of existential terror through him. He was a paradox, a researcher studying a data breach that he himself was a part of, now a walking anomaly in a reality he unknowingly helped overwrite. That he raced through the streets toward the address for the Chronographers' Nook, the fear of being digitally absorbed driving his legs. The static horizon was now a furious, buzzing field of gray and scarlet above the rooftops. That he found the bookstore in a narrow alley, tucked between a laundromat and a derelict clock repair shop. It wasn't the cozy, book-scented haven he remembered. The windows were opaque, covered in arcane symbols painted in dried mud, and a faded sign read, "The Chronographers' Nook, Alignment Therapy and Memory Support." Elias pushed open the heavy wooden door. A bell above chimed, but the sound was strangely distorted, like a corrupted digital file. The air inside was thick with incense and the scent of old copper. Instead of shelves of books, the walls were lined with chalkboards covered in complex diagrams that looked like server architecture overlaid with astrological charts. In the center of the room, a man sat behind a counter, meticulously polishing a large, brass astrolabe. This was Liam Chandler, the survivor. He was thin, with severe spectacles and the weary, sunken eyes of someone who hadn't slept soundly in years. Liam looked up, and his eyes instantly locked onto the ABAD hard drive Elias was holding. Recognition, sharp and instantaneous, flashed in his gaze. "You should have left that thing buried," Liam said, his voice flat and drained of emotion. "It's a containment vessel, not an archive." Elias rushed to the counter. "Liam, my name is Elias Vance. I was indexed. I think I'm part of the original data. I need to know about the Cassandra Alignment." Liam gently set down the astrolabe. "Cassandra was the key. We used her. We all did." He ran a tired hand through his thinning hair. "Sit down, Elias. You have a lot of missing memory to unpack." Elias sat on a stool, the ABAD drive secure on his lap. "Arcadia wasn't social media," Liam began, his eyes fixed on a diagram on the wall depicting an inverted pyramid. "It was the first successful attempt at chronological indexing. We used the initial, exclusive users, 10,000 of them, to create a consensus-based timeline. A perfect, predictable future. But Cassandra was an outlier. Her brain chemistry created too much entropy. She saw every possibility. Our index algorithms couldn't stabilize around her. She was a temporal singularity." Liam pointed to a massive chalk diagram labeled the 8 Echoes. "The Cassandra Alignment was the desperate attempt to contain her. We didn't shut down the platform, we tried to compartmentalize her timeline into 8 specific data vessels, echoes, and bury them." Elias looked down at his hard drive. The unsorted _echoes folder. The 10 files, 10, not 8. Liam's eyes widened in genuine alarm. They failed. The containment failed. 2 echoes escaped the capture field. What were the echoes? Elias asked, his throat dry. Each echo was a piece of Cassandra's consciousness, programmed to perform one task in her timeline. One was her love, one was her career, one was her regret, and one was her curiosity, the need to investigate the anomaly. Liam leaned over the counter, his voice a strained whisper. "That's you, Elias. Dr. Elias Vance was the projected identity Cassandra adopted in her timeline to investigate the temporal scar. You are the digital manifestation of her curiosity. That's why you found the drive. That's why your past is fractured. Elias absorbed the truth. He wasn't a researcher. He was a mission. He was an avatar of a dead woman's final, desperate attempt to understand her own annihilation. And the shadowy figure in the archives? Elias pressed. The one with my wallet? Liam flinched, glancing toward the static horizon visible through a crack in the window treatment. That's the index host. It's the server's countermeasure. When you, an echo, activate the drive, the host is deployed to eliminate the anomaly and complete the index. How do I stop it? How do I undo the index? Liam shook his head, a look of profound defeat on his face. You can't. The index is complete. You can only survive it. You need to align your memory with this new reality. No, Elias stood up, his resolve hardening. The host is still following the data stream. If I can destroy the root source of the index, the mainframe that's rewriting reality, I can push the timeline back. You don't know where the mainframe is, Elias. It's not in the university. But Cassandra did, Elias countered, tapping the ABAD drive. The videos. The temporal scar was bleeding into her physical space. Her profile, at Cassandra_lives, that's her final physical location before she was indexed. That apartment must be the physical nexus point. It's too dangerous. Liam pleaded. The host is converging on the strongest echo, you. You go there, you complete the alignment. A loud, screeching noise from the street outside interrupted them. It wasn't a car, or a siren. It sounded like metal grinding against concrete, and it was getting closer. Elias looked at Liam. You're a survivor. Your memory is intact. Come with me. I need someone who remembers the map of the original world. Liam looked at the astrolabe, then at the ominous diagrams on the wall, and finally at the raw, desperate humanity in Elias's eyes. We need transportation, Liam said, reaching under the counter. He pulled out a large, heavy revolver and a set of keys. The host won't stop at the archive. And in the indexed reality, my old car is now an index-neutral vehicle. The grinding sound outside stopped, directly in front of the bookstore. A long, thin shadow fell across the crack in the window. We have to go now, Elias urged. The temporal scar, Liam said grimly, opening a secret panel beneath the counter. It's not just a stain on the wall. It's a keyhole. And we are about to step through it. The screeching outside the Chronographers' Nook stopped with an unsettling finality. A heavy thud shook the small building, rattling the glass vials of memory supplements on Liam's shelves. That's the host, Liam stated, his hand steady as he gripped the revolver. It's learned to navigate the index streets. Come on. He opened the hidden panel completely, revealing a cramped flight of stairs leading down to a sublevel garage. Elias followed, the ABAD drive still clutched under his ARM.in. The small, concrete garage sat an anomaly, a beat-up, dark blue 1980s Ford Ltd Crown Victoria. It looked like an unmarked police cruiser from a forgotten decade. The index-neutral vehicle, Liam explained, tossing Elias the keys. It's old enough that its data footprint is negligible. The index host struggles to track analog signals. Elias slid into the driver's seat. The engine turned over on the first try, rumbling with a reassuringly mechanical sound. Liam got in the passenger side, placing the revolver on the dash. Cassandra's original address was 1421, Briarwood Lane, suburban DC, Elias said, his hands tight on the wheel. It's a 20-minute drive. That address might not exist anymore, Liam warned, pulling a tattered paper map from the glove compartment, another analog defense against the digital rewrite. We navigate the original timeline. Elias pulled the car out of the alley. As they emerged, the street was deserted, but the scene was unnerving. Every street lamp was flickering rhythmically, a digital strobe effect against the backdrop of the pulsing static horizon. Suddenly, a massive shape detached itself from the shadow of the clock repair shop that it was the index host. Taller and wider than the car, it moved with a jerky, unnatural momentum, its long, thin limbs scraping the concrete with the sound of metal on asphalt. Its form was an impossible geometry of shadow, its center a throbbing knot of the same oily blackness seen on Cassandra's video wall. Go! 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 Liam yelled. Elias slammed his foot on the accelerator. The Crown Vic's old engine roared, and they sped away just as the host lunged, its shadow hand missing the trunk by inches. As they drove, Elias navigated using Liam's paper map, relying on his survivor memory to find streets that, in the indexed reality, now looked subtly different. The landmarks were wrong. Familiar storefronts were replaced by businesses with bizarre, nonsensical names: the Index Cafe, Timeline Indexing Services, Index Indexing. The world was becoming a reflection of the data corruption. Briarwood Lane is a cul-de-sac. Dead end, Liam cautioned. If the host catches us there, we're trapped. Then we have to get there first, Elias replied, glancing in the rearview mirror. The host was following. Not with speed, but with relentless, impossible efficiency. It seemed to phase through solid objects, a flash of static where a fence was, and then the host was on the other side. The host isn't using the road network, Liam muttered, gripping the revolver. It's using the data grid. Power lines, fiber optics, it's traveling through the city's nervous system. As they crossed a major intersection, the host materialized directly in front of them, blocking the road. It seemed to have intercepted their intended path. Elias swerved hard, tires screeching, and narrowly avoided hitting a parked bus. The host turned its impossible, featureless head toward them. The drive, Elias. It's tracking the drive. Liam shouted. It wants the echoes back. If we stop, it will absorb us. Elias drove into a narrow residential street. He had to think like the data. He had to create an anomaly that the host couldn't compute. Liam, the temporal scar on the video, it was a manifestation of fractured time. What happens if we create a new, immediate fracture? You mean a paradox? Liam looked terrified. It would stabilize the host. No. It would confuse the system's tracking. The host is hunting the +0 hours target, Elias said, pointing to his chest where the ID card was. We need to drop something. That reads as -10 years. Elias reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his grandfather's antique silver pocket watch. The one seen in the 6-month projection. This watch is an analog anomaly, Elias said. Its material and design predate the index by decades. It's too old to be indexed. It's a ghost from the real past. What are you going to do? We are going to give the host a false index point to target, Elias said, his voice grim. As he spoke, the host appeared again, right behind them, now running with long, effortless strides. Its shadow seemed to stretch and encompass the road. Elias rolled down the passenger window. When I hit the brakes, throw the watch, and aim for that storm drain. Elias slammed on the brakes. The car skidded violently. Now. Liam threw the heavy silver watch out the window with all his might. It clattered on the concrete and bounced, just missing the storm drain cover. The index host, moving impossibly fast, stopped. Its massive frame hovered over the watch. A sound like a digital sigh, a long, deep shhwrr, emanated from its body. The host bent its impossible frame, its darkness enveloping the antique timepiece. The car, now back up to speed, rounded the corner. It took the bait. Elias yelled, adrenaline surging. It didn't take it, Elias, Liam corrected, staring back in horror. It's not absorbing the watch. It's indexing the street. They looked back. Where the host had paused, the entire stretch of asphalt, for about 30 feet, had turned a bubbling, shifting crimson. The temporal scar was not just bleeding, it was now a physical patch of reality that had been rewritten and marked for deletion. They had bought themselves 30 seconds, but the cost was an indelible wound in the fabric of the neighborhood. Briarwood Lane is 2 blocks away, Elias shouted, pressing the pedal to the floor. We have to get to Cassandra's apartment and find the source of the index before the host completes the alignment. Elias drove the index-neutral vehicle hard, the old sedan protesting loudly against the reckless speed. The smell of burning rubber and ozone filled the car. Behind them, the flickering streetlights marked the host's path, converging like iron filings to a magnet. They swerved into Briarwood Lane, a quiet cul-de-sac lined with identical suburban homes. Everything looked perfectly normal, too normal. A sinister stillness hung in the air, the kind that precedes a storm or a digital reset. 1421, Elias breathed, pulling the car abruptly into the driveway of a two-story house. The house was dark, unassuming, and utterly ordinary. The temporal scar is here, Liam warned, checking the chambers of his revolver. The index point. We have to be quick. If the host catches us inside, we are essentially walking into its primary processing unit. They abandoned the car and sprinted to the front door. The lock was old and brittle. Elias kicked it open easily. The inside was a time capsule of the initial video, the exact generic suburban living room, the leather sofa, the cheap rug. It was Cassandra's home, preserved in the moment she was indexed, but the silence was overwhelming, and the air felt heavy, like standing under deep water. Elias saw it immediately. The wall where Cassandra had been scrolling on her phone was covered. Not with paint or a stain, but with the full-scale, physical manifestation of the temporal scar. It spanned the entire wall, a pulsating, convex mass of dark crimson and black ooze. It looked like a biological organ that had been ripped out and stretched taut, covered in glistening, metallic threads. At its center, the black knot from the video had expanded into a circular void, a spot of absolute blackness that didn't reflect light, a digital singularity made flesh. The index is using this house as a server, Liam whispered, his voice shaking. The wall is a filter. It's bleeding the indexed reality back into the original timeline. Elias stepped closer, driven by the investigator part of his programmed self. He ignored the stench, a sickening mix of iron and burned plastic. He was looking for the mainframe connection, the root of the index. On the small wooden coffee table, there was a single, cryptic item, a deactivated cell phone, the exact model Cassandra was using in the video. Elias put on a pair of latex gloves he'd grabbed from the car, a final nod to his old researcher self, and picked up the phone. It was completely dead, but something was taped to the back, a tiny, microSD card. Elias quickly transferred the card to the ABAD drive's reader port. The drive hummed, recognizing the proprietary data. A single file loaded, host_core_coordinates.txt. Elias's eyes scanned the brief text file. It wasn't GPS. It was a physical and chronological address. Project Ghost Net Infrastructure. Core site, Abandoned City Transit Authority Substation, Grid Sector 7. Chronological alignment, active during the 3 a.m. synchronization window, the transit substation. Grid Sector 7. Elias exclaimed. Cassandra left us the coordinates. She predicted we would come back for the data. That's miles away, deep under the city. Liam shouted, his eyes darting to the front window. And we have about 30 seconds. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from the street outside, and the house lights, which had been off, violently flickered on and off. The sound was like a whip lashing the air. The host was here. Liam raised his revolver, aiming for the front door. The host will assume we are still trying to escape. We need to go out the back. As they moved toward the kitchen, the host's presence became undeniable. A high-pitched sound, like 1,000 dial-up modems screaming at once, intensified in the living room. Then, the temporal scar on the wall moved, the black knot in the center of the crimson ooze began to spin rapidly. From the deep blackness, a single, impossibly elongated limb, identical to the host's, punched through the fabric of the wall. It wasn't breaking through drywall, it was pushing through the membrane of time itself. The host was attempting a physical portal, bypassing the front door completely. The host is trying to index the house around us. Liam yelled. It's turning the room into a digital prison. Elias saw his reflection in a small, dusty mirror. His face was pale, his eyes wide. But beneath his desperation, he saw a glimmer of resolve. Cassandra's curiosity, now fully activated, that he pointed to the temporal scar. It's using the house's infrastructure as an anchor. We destabilize the anchor, we get time to run. Elias spotted a fire extinguisher by the kitchen door. He snatched it up, sprinted back, and aimed the freezing stream of chemicals at the center of the pulsating black knot in the wall. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The chemicals hit the knot, and the knot didn't just freeze, it screamed. A horrific, synthesized shriek that sounded like corrupted audio feedback. The entire crimson mass convulsed, and the limb that had punched through retracted rapidly, leaving behind a smoking, jagged hole. The host shrieked again outside, a sound of fury and confusion that bought us maybe 2 minutes. Elias gasped, dropping the extinguisher. The transit substation. It's our only chance to kill the core. They crashed out the back door and ran toward the old Ford Ltd., the digital scream of the host echoing from the front of the house. The index-neutral vehicle was their last analog defense in a world rapidly turning digital. The index-neutral vehicle roared down the suburban streets, its analog engine a defiant sound against the rising electronic hum of the city. Elias drove like a man possessed, his mind now a focused fusion of his researcher intellect and Cassandra's desperate, programmed will to survive. Liam was checking the map, tracing a complicated, defunct route through the city's maintenance tunnels. Grid Sector 7 is the oldest section of the city's power grid, he yelled over the engine noise. It's where the original fiber optic spine for Arcadia was laid, right beneath the old MTA substation. The index host is tracking the ABAD drive, Elias said, glancing in the rearview mirror. The streetlights were now rapidly cycling through shades of white and sickly red behind them. The host wasn't visible, but its presence was a crushing, atmospheric weight. We have to ditch the car before we get close. They reached the edge of the downtown area, where the towering skyscrapers cast geometric shadows onto the cracked, abandoned pavement. Elias pulled the Crown Vic into an alley and killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the distant, rhythmic whir of the host. They grabbed their essentials. Elias took the ABAD drive with the microSD card still inserted, and Liam took the revolver and a powerful flashlight. The substation entrance is a block away, Liam whispered, checking the dark alley corners. It's an access hatch on the roof of a defunct parking garage. They moved through the city like ghosts, keeping to the deepest shadows. The static horizon was now directly overhead, casting the entire city in a sickly, pulsating gray light, occasionally flashing with that violent crimson. They reached the parking garage. The structure was a crumbling, 6-story concrete shell. They quickly found the maintenance access stairs and began their frantic ascent. On the 3rd floor, Liam stopped, aiming his flashlight at the floor. A slick, dark trail of oily residue, the same substance dripping from the temporal scar, was smeared across the concrete, heading up the ramp. The host is already here, Liam hissed. It knew our destination before we did. It's defending the core. They continued upward, their steps echoing in the hollow silence. By the 6th floor, the whir sound was deafening, vibrating in Elias's teeth. The roof was a vast, open expanse, illuminated by the ominous static horizon. In the center was the rusted metal hatch to the substation, and standing directly over it, was the index host. That IT was fully manifested now, impossibly large, its darkness absorbing every photon of light. Its limbs were multiple, thin, and twitching, and its form seemed to flicker with a constant static discharge. It was a physical manifestation of a server error. IT turned its featureless head toward them. It didn't roar or move to attack, it simply stood its ground, its presence radiating pure, concentrated negation. Then, from the host, came a voice. Not Cassandra's whisper, but a loud, synthesized, male monotone. Anomaly, Elias Vance. Alignment required. Re-indexing will commence upon capture. It's talking through the environment. Elias shouted. It's routing its voice through the city's power grid. Liam fired the revolver. The heavy bullet hit the host dead center, but there was no impact. Instead, the bullet seemed to dissolve mid-air, replaced by a flash of white static and a small, delete sound. Analog weapons are ineffective. Liam yelled, dropping the useless gun. Elias focused on the substation hatch. The core is down there. It's the only way to sever the index. They ran toward the host. As they got within 10 feet, the asphalt beneath their feet began to shift and buckle, turning the familiar gray concrete into the bubbling, crimson membrane of the temporal scar. It's indexing the roof. Liam cried. We step on that, and we're written out. Elias jumped, landing just shy of the crimson edge. The host extended one of its impossible limbs, moving with unnatural speed. The drive. Elias realized. The ABAD drive is the only thing it cares about. He grabbed the drive and threw it hard onto the crimson membrane. The host froze. It turned its entire focus to the drive, its multiple limbs extending and converging on the data. The synthesized voice boomed, core data detected. Commencing absorption. While the host was focused, Liam leaped onto the substation hatch and yanked it open. A flight of steep, metal steps led down into utter darkness. Go. Go. Liam urged. Elias slid down the hole just as the host's massive form enveloped the ABAD drive. He heard a sound of digital satisfaction, a smooth, deep zrrt, as the host absorbed Cassandra's work. They clambered down the metal stairs, plunging into the inky blackness. They reached a narrow, brick-lined tunnel, the forgotten access route to Grid Sector 7. It will follow us, Elias said, panting, relying on Liam's flashlight to guide them. It has the drive. It has my identity. We only bought time to get to the source. They rounded a corner. The tunnel opened up into a cavernous, subterranean chamber. Pipes and wiring ran everywhere. In the center sat a massive, humming machine, a pre-internet era server bank, still active, connected to a spiderweb of antiquated fiber optics. This was the Genesis core, and attached to the side of the core, glowing with a soft, pulsing red light, was a standard wall socket. And plugged into that socket, charging its internal battery, was a simple, modern laptop. On the laptop screen, a familiar social media interface glowed brightly. Arcadia. That's it, Liam whispered in awe. That laptop is the only thing keeping the indexed reality running. It's the final firewall. Then, from the tunnel behind them, they heard the grinding scrape of the host's limbs. It was descending. We have to unplug it. Elias shouted. And destroy the core. Elias and Liam stood before the Genesis core, a humming altar of forgotten technology. The sight of the modern laptop, plugged into the ancient server bank and running the Arcadia interface, was the final, terrifying paradox. The new reality was tethered to the old hardware. The laptop is the final key, Liam gasped, raising the flashlight. If we unplug it, the core loses its active indexer. But the core itself is the physical scar, Elias countered, pointing to the massive, humming server racks. We have to destroy the hardware, or the index host will simply restore the connection and reboot the timeline. The sound of the host descending the metal stairs was deafening, a metallic screech mixed with the terrifying, synthesized whir. I'll buy you time, Liam said, his voice firm. He grabbed a heavy metal pipe from the floor. You get to that laptop. Unplug it, and then find a way to overload the core. Liam, the host has the ABAD drive. It knows everything about us, and it's carrying all of Cassandra's memory, including the coordinates to this place. Liam smiled grimly. Then I'll distract the host with something it can't index, free will. Elias nodded, seeing the desperate resolve of a true survivor. He sprinted toward the glowing laptop. The index host dropped from the stairwell into the chamber with a shuddering crash. It was immense, its form flickering with the data Elias had just given it. It was no longer just a shadow, its outline now held hints of metallic cables and crimson membrane. It immediately focused on Elias, the anomaly. Elias Vance. You are a fractured echo. Return to the data. Alignment is mandatory. Liam swung the pipe, connecting with a loud clang against the host's knee-high limb. The impact created a brief surge of static, but the host didn't even slow its approach toward Elias. "It's distracting me," Elias realized, seeing the futility of Liam's effort. "It knows the laptop is the goal." Elias reached the Genesis core. The laptop screen was hypnotic, showing the active Arcadia network, the number of currently indexed users rapidly climbing, 9,998. 9,999, 10,000. The index was reaching completion. Elias grabbed the laptop's power cord. "Don't," the host's voice boomed, now right behind him. Elias yanked the cord, the laptop screen went instantly dark. The core's humming stopped, the silence was total, profound. The subterranean chamber plunged into absolute darkness, save for the weak beam of Liam's flashlight. For a moment, Elias felt overwhelming hope. He had done it. Then, a low, guttural pulse began to resonate from the mainframe. The core was still alive. Its internal battery was sustaining the index. Liam shone his light on the core. A small, emergency red light was blinking furiously on the central server bank, and next to it, an open panel revealing a web of brightly colored, archaic wires. "Emergency bypass." Liam screamed. "It's going to execute the final alignment." "The wires, Elias, find the master clock wire." The host was moving, its massive shadow enveloping them both. It lifted a long, razor-thin appendage. Elias shone his flashlight onto the chaotic wires. He knew the Genesis architecture. The master clock regulated the chronological synchronization of all index data. Without it, the index would collapse into chronological noise. The orange one. The striped orange and green wire. Elias shouted, recognizing the legacy color code for temporal data transfer. He reached for the wire, but the host was faster. The dark appendage slammed down, pinning Elias's arm to the core's metallic casing, crushing his wrist. He cried out in pain. "Liam! The wire! Now!" Liam, seeing his opportunity, dropped the flashlight and grabbed the orange and green striped wire with both hands. "What happens when you cut the master clock?" Liam yelled. Elias gritted his teeth, the pain searing up his arm. "The index reverses. It won't just destroy the host, it will try to restore the original timeline. We have to hold on." The host shrieked a final, deafening sound, a concentrated digital roar of pure denial. Failure to comply. Commencing full anomaly eradication. Liam closed his eyes and ripped the wire out of the core. The effect was not an explosion, but an implosion. The host's massive form instantly began to shudder violently. It wasn't fading, it was violently reversing. The dark blackness turned into a rapid-fire sequence of light and shadow, and the terrifying limbs snapped back, dissolving into pure digital static. Elias felt a crushing pressure on his entire body, as if he were being simultaneously pushed and pulled through history. He saw flashes of his life, his original life with Professor Graves, the functional computer science department, the real, old university sign, all played in reverse. Then, the final paradox. The host, in its last millisecond of existence, shrieked a synthesized word, a whisper in Elias's mind, "I am you." The light went white. Elias woke up. He was in the deep archives, lying on the floor, the smell of ozone and old paper thick in the air. The emergency lights were off, the regular fluorescents were on, humming normally. He was alone. The ABAD hard drive was sitting neatly on the desk. The antique CRT monitor was off. The wall was clean, pale yellow. He looked at his wrist. It was bruised, but not crushed. He stood up, walking back toward the office door. He felt a profound sense of rightness. The timeline had been restored. He was safe. He looked at his phone. Full signal. He called Professor Graves. She answered instantly, annoyed. "Elias? What is it? You're late for your grant meeting. The original timeline." He had one. Elias walked out of the archives, up the stairs, and into the sunlight. As he walked past the university sign, he glanced at the founding date, St. Jude's University, EST 1888. The inscription was perfect, but then, he noticed a new, tiny detail, graffiti, freshly etched onto the stone just beneath the date. 2 words, scratched deep, Truth Pulse Lives, Liam Chandler, the survivor, had made it through. Elias smiled. He touched his pocket, checking for his grandfather's watch. It wasn't there. He had traded the analog anomaly for the timeline that he reached the main courtyard. He saw students, normal students, scrolling on their phones that he pulled out his own phone and accessed his notes. He typed the coordinates he had memorized: abandoned City Transit Authority substation, grid sector 7. He had to go back and secure the core, to make sure it was truly inert. That he paused before hitting save. Something felt wrong. That he clicked on his profile to add a final note. His name was Elias Vance. His occupation, researcher, but his eyes drifted to a small, nearly invisible thumbnail photo attached to his university profile, a photo he never remembered uploading. That it was a picture of him, standing next to a beautiful, smiling woman with wide, unsettling eyes. Cassandra. The caption beneath the photo was a single word, labeled as his old status. At CUROSITY he was not just a researcher. He was an echo who had survived the index reversal, carrying a small, persistent fragment of Cassandra's digital ghost. He was the perpetual anomaly. He looked up at the sky. It was clear, blue, and perfect. But now, when he closed his eyes, he could still see the faint, shimmering gray of the static horizon. Waiting, the index was gone. But the echo chamber was now inside him.